This next project wasn't really done by choice, but more out of necessity. My septic tank was bad and we needed to replace it, but in order to replace the septic tank, we had to clear a bunch of trees for the new drainage field per the county. Everyone I talked to wanted about $10,000 to clear the trees, and it's only about $2,000 to rent a backhoe for a couple of days, so that's what we decided to do. Luckily, my brother is an equipment operator and actually knows how to run this thing. You can see us taking our very first bite into the woods. I'm pretty sad to have to knock these trees down, but there's no other way to replace the tank. After getting our first foothold in the woods, we start pushing down some trees. The first method we tried was just to push on them and use the leverage of the machine. Unfortunately, the trees were too big and we couldn't just knock them over. The next approach was to dig around the roots of the tree on 3 sides to weaken things up and then push on it. Fortunately, this was the ticket and we started knocking some trees down. I had cut a couple of trees down beforehand and we found that keeping the tree intact was much easier than pulling out a stump where the tree had already been cut. After each tree was cut down, I would have to go and use the chainsaw and cut it into pieces small enough to move, and then Daniel would have to use the front blade of the backhoe to fill in the big hole. We weren't working too far from where the goats live, and they were happy to jump up and eat any leaves that fell over the backside of their fence. While the backhoe was running, I was going back and forth and pulling trees and branches into the burn pile to get them out of the way best we could. Obviously, Davis wouldn't miss a project like this for the world, and he was running around getting covered in dirt while his uncle was pushing over trees. You can see here, he also stole my radio and started listening to some music and dancing around. We kicked up and dug up lots of nice new soft dirt, which was very entertaining for Davis, and my wife wasn't as impressed. The other reason we rented a backhoe was to dig out the pond. Once we finished the septic leach field, we moved over and started clearing it out. Now, using an excavator for a project like this would be more ideal, but as I learned, you could only rent up to a mini-X or miniature excavator. They kind of limit the size you can get, so this backhoe was the biggest piece of equipment I was allowed to rent. Pretty sure the pond is spring-fed, and you can see there are some animals here, but no fish. I think there's just too much sediment and pine straw in the way, so we're trying to clear a lot of that out. We're also trying to expand the borders of the pond as much as possible, or at least as far as this backhoe can reach. With digging out from both sides of the pond that we can reach, we're able to increase its size by 30 or 40%, which is really pretty good. We took all the extra mud and kind of made a gradation to the bank so it's a little more pleasant to walk down into it. The ultimate goal is to be able to swim in this pond and maybe stock up some fish. I feel like we're a lot closer now than when we started. I still have a ways to go, but I'm going to work on the pond in a couple of different videos. After we were done actually digging, Davis, of course, got to go on a little ride over the grass, and as a little boy, he was absolutely ecstatic. After that, we decided to use our last few hours of the rental to work on some trails. We may as well use it when I have the opportunity to do so. I know this thing's not a bulldozer, but it's honestly pretty surprising how strong trees are, even really small ones. But we were able to pick through the trees and find a path and kind of get things started for a trail. I'll definitely have to come back behind this machine and pick up all the debris, but it gives us a good starting point. This is really the only part of my property where we can use the backhoe to run down small trees. The rest of it has pretty large pine trees, and I'll have to kind of pick through them with a chainsaw later on. This was definitely a fun project weekend, and after everything was said and done, we had to do a quick cleanup, which of course Davis was happy to help with as well.